he'll open us up in a prayer, and then we'll be ready to rock and roll.
Okay.
Mic check 1 2. Mic check 1 2.
Mic check.
You ready to break out to a hip hop song?
I wasn't know.
Amen. Thank you. You are listening to the Financial Promise Radio Show, 30 Minutes of Power with Jason Fields. And as I posted on Facebook, I have my homegirl here, Nakisha Adams, the CEO of Scribble Inc., www.scribbleinc.com. For many of you, before we get into my relationship and the good work that Nakisha does, I always have to give a shout out to our sponsors. My organization, which Nakisha has done a great deal of work, and we've been very successful. The Financial Promise, which is my foundation, where we teach personal financial literacy and business literacy. You can reach us there at www.thefinancialpromise.com. And also my investment platform, where we take individuals to help them save and invest at no account minimums. You can open the account for free. Is to get you to start investing and building a portfolio. We accept $1 a month if that's all you have, because we want to just make sure you are investing and starting to plan for your future. You can reach us there at www.bwnonline.com. Now, I am excited. I am delighted to bring you all a friend, a wonderful grant writer, the utmost professional, a soror, a fellow Cardinal Stritch Wolf, a woman of God, a dear friend, and a moneymaker. So, Nakisha, welcome to the show.
Thank you, and thank you for that introduction.
Yeah, I am trying to blow you up. And so the things we want to talk about today is because I think a lot of people may not know or may not take full advantage of using grant writers. And how to get a grant writer, how to determine who's the best grant writer for you. And so today's show, I want to cover, one, what exactly is a grant writer? What do you do? Why should people bring you on board? And then what's the reward of that? And so give us a little bit about you and Scribble Inc., how it got started.
Scribble Inc. got started totally by accident. I will be honest with you. I did not wake up to become a grant writer.
Okay.
Did not really know a lot about grant writing. I was, like most people, went to college with a plan, and my plan was business and finance. I needed an elective to finish my degree, and grant writing fits in that time slot and what I was doing. I took the class, and it pretty much changed everything for me. Okay. I was excited about it. I got really good feedback from my instructor as far as the assignments I completed, and I was networking with a group of individuals, and at this network function, one of the individuals mentioned that he needed a grant writer. My friend said, "Don't you know how to do grant writing? You took a class." I'm like, well, it's a difference between taking a class and actually
doing
sitting down writing it. But he took a chance on me. He figured he had already gone for a grant twice, and it wasn't something that was funded, so he figured I could look over it, maybe give him some tips, some suggestions. I did that, made a couple of edits, and a couple of weeks later he was awarded funding. So it was just one of those things that kind of fell in my lap, and from there, word of mouth spread, and I would dedicate, my hobby to grant writing. So it was a hobby, and then it became a business, and it was really a push from individuals that I knew who wanted to be connected with a grant writer. There was a need for it, and there weren't a lot of grant writers, specifically of color, that they were able to connect with.
And I want to talk about that, and to give people the benefits of a grant writer, and I think you hit on it. One, you don't have a lot of grant writers of color. I mean, that's how I found you, via LinkedIn, and I've dealt with some other grant writers, and they were cool, nothing wrong with them, anything of that nature. You and I fit a little bit more, just because you had we came from the same stock, and I think you bought into the vision of what I was trying to do, and you actually become in this grant writing area, a mentor, a friend, somebody I turn to And we've been successful. And for those of you who are listening to us right now, Nakisha has gotten the Financial Promise Organization. We were just awarded a letter from Old National Bank. I'm meeting with Associated Bank in 99%. We'll probably get that as well as some other grants. Why don't people utilize grant writers? Is it because they think they're expensive? Is it because, why don't more nonprofit organizations understand if you want to be successful, you got to have a grant writer on your team? Why is that important?
I think one of the reasons you don't hear a lot about nonprofits utilizing grant writers is because a lot of established nonprofits already have someone in-house that can serve that function if they need. But a lot of people who are just starting out as far as creating nonprofits, they don't know how to find a grant, let alone that you need a grant writer to execute what's needed. A lot of times, especially with the newer organizations, it's, I have a nonprofit, I heard there's money out there, how do I get it? So with me, it's not necessarily writing the grant or taking on that responsibility for them of finding potential sources of funding, but also educating them on what they need to actually get to the point of hiring a grant writer. You and I have had this conversation several times, and someone can come to me to write a grant. I could totally write grants all day long and know that you are not going to get them, but it wouldn't benefit me or you.
And I was just telling our good friend Joanne Williams, former media personality, I was telling her about you and how you helped our organization. I said one of the things that I appreciated most was when you told me that you won't accept everybody, meaning you won't just say, hey, yeah, I'll be your grant writer, take your money. You said you actually want to help people grow and get to a point where you may not be at a point where you need a grant writer or you can pay a grant writer.
Right.
Why is it? What? That's one of the things that I think separates you from. Again, no offense to any other grant writers, but a lot of people just take the money.
Right.
You said no. What does that look like when you get to a person and you're evaluating them? What makes you go, you know what, you're not ready for me yet?
I look at what they're doing as an organization. If you're starting out new, chances are you don't have all the components that a foundation needs for a funder to look at and say, yes, we believe in what you're doing. We're going to build a relationship with you. Part of that entails having a strong board behind you.
Correct.
Is your board raising funds? Is your board promoting that organization? Are they bringing in donors? Are they helping with fundraising? It's also about establishing relationships. A lot of times I tell people, we can go for a grant, but I don't want you to get discouraged if we don't receive it, because sometimes it's about just opening that door and getting yourself on that radar. So if we can have a funder look at you, you may not get it because that relationship isn't established yet, but next year we can go for it again and they can see that you're still around, you're still sustaining. So there's something about your organization that's valuable, and now they may want to look and reconsider doing business with you.
And so some organizations may be, and just to reiterate, because I think I've learned this and watched other people in mistakes in the business world where you don't have a board. Here you have an organization, but you don't have a board. Or you have a board and it's everybody in your family, which is not a, nobody likes to see that.
Right. And I'm not saying you can't put people in positions that you already know. What I'm saying is that when it comes to your board, you want to make sure you're surrounded by people who believe in your mission and your organization as much as you do, because the work of what you're doing is going to fall on your board. So you want people that are going to be dedicated, and you want people that can carry the responsibility of different things that need to be done. You want someone who's good in fundraising and attracting donors. You want someone that can do the marketing. You want someone that can do, the behind things, seeing things when it comes to writing up certain things. So that's why I say, take your time to establish a board and make sure it's individuals that you trust and are committed, because they're the ones that are going to be in charge of making sure your foundation or your organization's name is out there.
And going after a grant is not just overnight. It's not just overnight. It's not automatic.
No, it's not. And, a lot of foundations have different cycles. They have different time periods. So you may apply for a grant, but you may not hear about it for months. It just all depends on how the foundation is set up. And typically when you're getting ready to write a grant, there are certain things that you want to make sure are strong. You know, you want to have a strong mission statement. You want to be able to tell about successes that your organization has had. You want to be able to describe in detail what it is you're doing, what is your project, because ultimately grant writing is telling your story to a potential funder so they believe in what you're doing as much as you do.
And that story has to be specific. I mean, it has to be
Right.
clear and concise.
Right.
And one of the things that I think I took for granted, being in the business world, I mean, one, I'll be honest, I knew grants had different cycles, but I didn't know when, and I didn't know who to go to. And
Right.
so it was imperative to me because I know that things that I'm not good at, I will pay people to do. Because
Right.
I just, now finding the right person, how do you find the right grant person though? Because it took me a minute to get to you.
And sometimes it will, you know, it's about establishing a relationship. Just like with a job, you're going to interview. And you may look really good on paper, but in that interview, you may see some things that may raise questions or may raise concerns, or it may be just a kind of wait and see type thing, you know, and maybe you hire a grant writer and as they go through the process with you, maybe you don't like the timing in which they did things, or maybe you guys are on two different schedules as far as what they are going to do for you and what they're able to do for you.
So walk me through this process. So and for all our listening audience, for our viewers on Facebook Live, they listen to this show. They look you up, www.scribblelink.com. They call you, hey, we heard you on that fantastic guy, we can't remember his name, Jason Field. We heard you on his awesome show. They call you, what's the process? What happens?
Usually I like to set up a consultation.
Okay.
I like to do a meeting with those involved in the organization so we can sit down and discuss what it is you're looking to do, what it is you're looking to fund, why the funding is necessary, and do you have the necessary components to get to the point where you're ready to sit down and write a grant.
Are there immediate red flags that you see?
There are, but with me, it's not about just telling people, no, you're not ready, come back when you're ready. It's about educating them on what they need to get to that level. And sometimes I take on clients where I have to, you know, help them to the process until they're finally able to sit down and write a grant. And I think that's what clients appreciate most about me, is I'm not afraid to tell them no.
Right.
And it's not just about me taking their money, but it's about education as well.
And so so their first consultation is is this going to be a good, fruitful relationship?
Right.
Meaning, will I be able to work? Will you listen? I mean, you as the grant writer,
Right.
will you listen to me? Because this is what I do.
Right.
Lord knows that has to be hard when you get people that don't do.
Right. And what I tell people, you know, in our consultation, you have to be transparent. You have to be honest with me about what it is you're doing and what you're trying to do. That's the only way I'm going to be able to help you, is if you're able to be transparent about where your organization is and where you're looking to go.
Okay. How does a person look? Like, I knew it was easy for me to know which areas I should target, but I didn't know when their cycles were. There is some science to grant writing, meaning as a grant writer, you know certain organizations, what's their process, how they feel. When we started interacting, it was last year? When did we?
Last year,
June?
Mm-hmm.
June, we sat down downtown in my office, we had lunch at Elsa's, and we talked about what I wanted to do, the vision there, and then not that we took a break, we both had some things to do. I think you was traveling like always. I always get on her because she always traveling.
Well, yeah, you get on me, but I always let you know when I'm
Yes,
traveling.
you do. You always. And Jacob, she don't just travel to regular places, bro. It'd be like I'm going to Europe for 2 weeks. It'd be extravagant places. I'm gonna be in Hawaii, but I'll be back. But when we met, the funny thing was, and we joke about this now. The next time we saw each other after our meeting was in graduation.
It was.
Graduation. So I'm going to graduate. She's graduating, and we didn't tell each other. So I'm sitting in.
Like, you gotta explain that you asked me what I was doing.
I asked you what you were
and
doing.
I was like, oh, I got something to do.
Right.
And you was like, okay, we'll connect during the week.
We'll connect during the week. So I asked Nakisha, yo, what you doing? And so she was like, yeah, I got something to do. And I'm like, okay. And so I go to graduation. I wasn't gonna go, to be honest. And so I go, and I'm like, yo, hold up. she's sitting in front of me with the robe and the cap and the gown on. And I'm like, why you didn't tell me you were graduating and you here too.
Yeah, I looked at you like you didn't tell me either. I'm like, this is a relationship built on trust.
And here we both are graduated, didn't say that to nobody. So once you decide, hey, we're going to give this a go, we're going to work together. How do people help you help them? You know what I mean? Like I told you, there was places I didn't know there are all these places, grant places, you have access to those. I didn't know how to process all of that stuff. Do we just, as people search for grants, do we just get out of your way? I mean, how do we put ourselves in a position where we're actually helping you help us?
Well, 50-50. I have clients who already have sources that they want to go after. So they'll come to me with the grants. This is what I want to go after, and they just need me to write it up.
Okay.
Then I have the other half that doesn't know where to start, and they're retaining my services for that as well.
So they're retaining you. So a person can come to you and say, "Look, I don't know where to go. I just know I just know there's money out here.
Mm-hmm.
Can you help me get it?"
Exactly.
Is that easier? I mean, because is it easier when a person? What's easier? Is it easier when a person comes?
It's easier either way. I think what makes my job easier is the client having the necessary pieces of information I need when I need it. You
Okay.
know from experience,
Yeah.
I'll text you, email, call you.
And at all kinds of hours and days.
Exactly.
And that's cool.
And I'll submit a proposal and
Right.
come back to you and say, hey, Jason, I need X, Y, and Z from
Right.
you because the client, that we're going to, they want it. Or I'll say, Jason, can you get me, a copy of your 990 or your expenses or your balance sheet? So it's all about making sure you're organized and you have that information readily available, because when I'm writing grants, as you know, we're dealing with timelines.
Yes, we are.
So I may not be in a position where I can wait 2 weeks because you got to contact or hunt down so-and-so to get you pieces of information that you should really have.
That you should have already.
Right.
So some of the things that people should have, nonprofit organizations, organizational budget,
Right.
some kind of tax.
And I'll just go back to the budget part.
Yeah.
An organization budget, but also a project budget.
A project budget, right? They're two different budgets.
Right.
Because the last thing we just did, what we just submitted for, we submitted the project budget.
Right.
The guy came back and said, "Hey, I need the organization budget." Luckily, we did that. We
Right.
had it. So project budgets, organization budget, there's a tax form, either some kind of
Your 990.
990, which is your tax form for your nonprofit organization. Now, unless you brought in over less than 50,000,
then it's going to be a 990, the postcard.
990 postcard, and so
Also, your letter of determination, because
Letter-
organizations want to see that you are, in
now
fact, a
what is
nonprofit.
that? The letter, because you've written those for me, the letters of determination.
Well, I don't write them, but it's what you get from the IRS. So your organization
yes.
has to submit to the IRS for that, and that's to determine that your nonprofit is indeed a 501c3. Because as you know, a lot of the grants that we go after, they're very specific
Yeah.
about what type of organization you can be, so they want proof of that.
And that determination letter is something, and see guys, this lets you know I don't handle all this stuff. The letter that the IRS sends you is letting other organizations, letting other people know, yes, you are a full-fledged
Right.
nonprofit,
Right.
tax-exempt organization.
And 9 times out of 10, if you're starting a nonprofit, you generally have already done that, as well as your articles of incorporation and
Well, we would like to believe.
and getting your,
Some of y'all out here
tax
wrong.
exemption from the state.
Right.
Because what we don't ever want to put, your grant writer or your organization in a position that something shady is going
Right,
on.
right.
And we know that with corporations, it also happens with nonprofits. So we never want a person to lose that determination or, have their nonprofit on the news because it was being run for something else.
Right. So the 990, the organizational budget, the project budget, your list of board members.
Exactly.
And here's one of the things that I believe a lot of people that I see sometimes just starting out, they may overlook or they don't really think about it. And that's a question that comes up. who are the members on your board,
Right.
and what's their backgrounds and what do they do? How important is that?
It's very important because funders look at that. I tell people all the time, when you're connecting with a funder, it's like going on a date.
Okay.
Funders are looking to see if this is going to be a good match, a good fit, a good relationship. Because if they're believing and giving you money, you know, that's their reputation too. The last thing a funder wants is to award your nonprofit a grant and then your nonprofit is, you know, brought under allegations because they spent the grant money in ways they weren't supposed to, or the nonprofit was set up to cover something else up, you know. So it's a relationship. You're interviewing, you're telling them, this is why I feel you should go with me. You should take a chance on me.
So so a person, they come to you, they work the process, you and the organization decide, hey, this is good, we're going to move forward. You go after a grant, you kick in, you do your work. God willing, the organization gets the award letter. It comes in the mail. Does your organization, do you also help with the monitoring and paperwork, or do you leave that to the organization?
It all depends. Sometimes organizations are already established and set up where they have someone that can do their reporting, and sometimes I'm called in to do the reporting part up, you know, also.
And how important is the reporting? Because a lot of people get caught up.
Very important, because the reporting is essentially a check-in with the funder to say, hey, when we applied for your grant, we had certain things that we wanted to achieve. This is how it's looking on our end. We told you we wanted 200 people enrolled in this particular program for the summer. As of halfway through the year, we've met half our goal. You know, so it's a check-in. It's to make sure that the goals you set for your organization, are they attainable? Are you doing what is necessary to take your organization and make it sustainable?
Where do you go? I mean, for people who are just now starting out, right? I started this nonprofit. I filled out the state work, the paperwork. I got my IRS determinant letter. Now what's the next step if they're seeking grant funding?
Well, if you have all that, I think that you would have a board. You would try to determine how your nonprofit is going to be sustainable, because you don't want solely, grants should never be your first dollar coming through the door.
Okay.
So you want to make sure you have a plan as how you're going to sustain this organization. And even with grants, funders will ask, you know, outside of grant funding, how do you plan to sustain this? Are there other funders? Are there other donors? Are you going to be fundraising? They want to know that.
I think that's very important, and I'm glad you touched on that, because I think it's often overlooked that, and when I set up my organizations, I wanted to make sure grants were not the only way we were going to be receiving things. And so there's some business things. A lot of times I think people underestimate, they think because this money is out there, it'll continue to be out there.
Exactly.
And that's not the case.
No, it's not, especially with the climate today, you know, as far as political. There are a lot of funders who pots are smaller than what they've been in the past. There's also funders that, because they have smaller pots, they tend to go with organizations that they already have relationships with. So as I tell clients, I don't guarantee that you're going to get anything we submit, but what it does is it does open you up to have your foot in the door and establish a relationship with the funder that you could possibly receive funding in the future.
And I've learned that depending on the economy, and as you said, in different political climates, certain organizations may not get as much funding depending on who's in charge.
Right.
And there are times where in the economy, philanthropy funders, they have to cut back.
Right.
So that means that money dries up. And if you are an organization that, you know, 100% of your stuff is on grants, you're in trouble.
Right. Because what happens if you're operating your program that, you know, you're dependent on, let's say, $50,000 in grant funds, and that next year comes and you're now only working with $20,000.
Right.
Now, how are you going to get that other $30,000?
Now you gotta not pay folks, and programs and projects don't get done.
That's the last thing you as a nonprofit want to do. You don't want to look to see what programs have to be taken away because you're not able to operate them. So it's very important to establish how you're going to sustain it up front, what portion is going to be up to your board to bring in donors. What portion is going to be through fundraising? You know, there are some nonprofits that have been operating out of pocket for a long time before they even get to the process of needing a grant writer. I sit down with clients all the time who tell me, I'm ready for a grant because I've been operating this is out my pockets. So it's about being realistic as well.
And as we close, and I want to thank you, we're going to have you on again periodically, because I know when I put the word out that I was having you on, you went celebrity status on me, and LinkedIn and Facebook. I'm like, she thinks she tight. So
But
tell us.
guess who I talk to still on a regular basis? Make sure you okay.
I know how you, like I said, as long as ain't nobody taking you away from my money, we good. Tell all the people where they can reach you at, because I really want people to use the expertise, because you're good at it. I mean, you are good at this job. And I believe it's imperative as us, particularly as people of color, to go, hey, you can level up and start getting these things, but you have to engage and use the right people. Where can people reach you?
The best way to reach me would be through my website. It gives you contact information. And I also want to let people know that if you go to the website, which is www.scribbleinc.com, and you sign up for the newsletter, you will also receive my complimentary grant guide, which is essentially a guide that I put together so you can go through and understand grant terms. There's questions that I've answered that people ask me all the time. So it essentially will help you get to the point of deciding, okay, is it time for a grant writer? And it's a very useful guide. My Facebook personal page is Nakisha Adams, but we also have the business page, which is also Scribble Inc., and of course LinkedIn.
I want to thank you, Nakisha Adams, my homegirl, soror, my grant writer, my friend, my road dog. So thank you for coming to the show. Thank you all. You've been listening to The Financial Promise, 30 minutes of